No. Okay, I see we have two teams here, CN and MZ. Relator, your team code is?
Our code is CN.
Okay. Put that down here, and therefore MZ is respondent. Okay. I will begin first asking everyone if they wish to come on camera. And we'll begin so we don't interrupt the flow of the trial. I'd like to begin with first, judges will introduce themselves. My name is Steve Dotterman. I will be your presiding judge. I have judged high school mock trial for 12 years now. I enjoy it very much, and I am also currently the president and board of trustees of the parent organization, Ohio Center for Law-Related Education. And this is one of my favorite activities in the whole world. So I look forward to presiding over this trial. By way of reference, I have been an attorney at Fifth Third Bank for a little over 40 years. So I am not a litigator, but I enjoy this activity very much. I do have two scoring judges this time, I believe. Ruth?
Hi.
There we go. Okay, Ruth, yes, please proceed.
My name is Ruth Hartman. I'm an attorney, a litigation attorney at Baker Hostetler in Cleveland. My daughter is in high school, not one of the high schools participating today, but she is in mock trial, so I know how much time and effort you all put into this project. It's my first time judging, and I've been impressed with everyone so far. Thanks. I'm going to go off.
Thank you. And Guinevere?
Hi there, I'm Guinevere Demarest. I am an attorney at Frost, Brown & Todd in Cincinnati, Ohio. I have competed in both mock trial and moot court competitions. This is going to be my second time actually judging a mock trial competition, so I am really excited to see how everybody does, and best of luck.
Okay, thanks very much. And again, so we don't interrupt the flow of the trial, I'm going to ask both teams to introduce themselves and their participants, starting with the relator.
So I'm one of the attorneys for the relator, Carter Stevens, and my co-counsel is Kat McAndrew. And then we are going to call to the stand today two witnesses who will be played by Biz Conan and Charlotte Lafley.
Okay, and they will be portraying which witnesses?
The first will be Hollis Fitzpatrick, who will be Biz Conan, and then the second will be Aspen Bennett, who will be Charlotte Lafley. Finley Ibarra, my bad.
That's right. Who is your timekeeper here?
The bailiff is Catherine.
Okay, Catherine, and she'll be acting as both bailiff and timekeeper.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Respondent, please introduce yourself and your teammates.
Hello, Your Honor. My name is Tanisha Dakwe, and my co-counsel is Alyssa Ettinger. Today, our witnesses will be played by Lydia Williams, who is Alice Mazikis, and Cindy Ma, who will be Riley John. Our timekeeper is Carly Courtney as well.
Okay, great. Let me try to rearrange windows here. Let's see. bear with me. I'm rearranging windows on my screen so I can have a little bit better flow of the participants. Let's see. Catherine. Okay. Oh, there we go. There we go. Sorry. Thought I had lost my other timekeeper. Here we go. Okay, teams, starting with the relator, do you have any pretrial matters to cover?
No pre-trial matters, Your Honor.
Okay. Pardon me. Respondent?
We have no pretrial matters as well, Your Honor.
Well, if we have no pretrial matters, I'm going to ask bailiff to open court.
Hear ye, hear ye. The Court of Common Pleas for Cardinal County, State of Buckeye is open pursuant to adjournment. All having business before this honorable court, draw near, give attention, and you shall be heard.
Thank you very much, bailiff. As you're aware, I have a statement to read before we begin trial. I have a brief message to share with today's participants. We all have feelings, assumptions, perceptions, fears, and stereotypes about others. Some biases we're aware of, and others we might not be fully aware of, which is why they are called implicit biases or unconscious biases. As participants in the Ohio mock trial program, it's important to resist jumping to conclusions or acting upon personal likes or dislikes. Resist letting bias, prejudice, or public opinion influence your behavior inside or outside of the courtroom. Treat all individuals with respect, regardless of ability, gender, race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, age, national origin, or socioeconomic status. So at this time, I'm going to ask the relator to present their opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. My name is Kat McAndrew, and today my co-counsel Carter Stevens and I have the pleasure of representing Relator Hollis Fitzpatrick, a woman who had poured everything into her family business only to have the government pull the rug out from under her feet, leaving her with no chance to regain her footing. The Fitzpatrick family restaurant, Fitzpatrick's, has been one of Harmony's most cherished diners for decades, and its cheerful and inviting atmosphere has made people feel at home for generations. Until recently, that is, when the beloved mom and pop restaurant was forced to close down permanently due to the harsh and unfair COVID-19 restrictions instituted by government officials, respondents Fran DeBeer and Ellis Mazakis. In Supreme Court case Murr v. Wisconsin, the court stated that the protection of property, quote, empowers persons to shape and to plan their own destiny in a world where governments are always eager to do so for them. Unfortunately for Ms. Fitzpatrick, the government did not respect her or her business's right to property, and instead of Ms. Fitzpatrick being able to shape her own destiny and business, the government determined that for her with the implementation of arbitrary restrictions that put her out of business for good. Under the partial regulatory takings claim presented in the case Penn Central Transportation Company versus the City of New York, there are three separate circumstances under which a partial takings claim may be sustained. The first occurs if the taking has caused substantial and irrecoverable financial damage to the business. For many restaurants, adapting to current trends or new competitors comes with financial hardship. However, These restrictions pushed restaurants like Fitzpatrick's past hardship and into permanent closure. Not able to make any kind of profit, the financial damage caused to Ms. Fitzpatrick's business goes further than irrecoverable. It crumbled the foundations of her family's business, one that had been sustained for generations. The second circumstance occurs when the taking has destroyed investment-backed expectations or financial decisions. Ms. Fitzpatrick could not have predicted the pandemic or the restrictions that followed. The financial decisions she made up until the implementation of the restrictions were not based on the possibility of overbearing COVID restrictions taking away her ability to make a profit. Fitzpatrick's could not have anticipated these regulations, which therefore proves that they interfered with reasonable investment-backed expectations. The third circumstance is when the taking occurs under discriminatory governmental action. These regulations singled out the restaurant industry, rendering many smaller businesses unable to sustain themselves. Restaurants were the first to be shut down and the last to be reopened. Unable to operate for 67 days, Fitzpatrick's was not able to regain its balance even once reopened. Additionally, the governor granted special exemptions from these regulations to friends of theirs, yet didn't open up an official exemption policy until 165 days after restaurants were permitted to reopen. The burden of proof rests with the respondent and rests with the relator, and to satisfy that burden, exceeding the standard of preponderance of the evidence, we will today prove each pillar of the partial regulatory takings claim. You will hear from Relator Hollis Fitzpatrick, who will testify that she could not have anticipated this egregious enforcement of the regulations and that the severity of the regulations left her with no hope to sustain her business. You will also hear from the director of the Buckeye Restaurant Association, Finley Ibarra, who will testify to the economic impact of the restrictions on the restaurant industry, and also the targeting of the industry as a whole. Hollis Fitzpatrick had her family business ripped away from her. Regardless of the intention of the regulations, lives and legacies were ruined as a result of the government's wrongful conduct. We respectfully request that the court grant Relator Hollis Fitzpatrick's motion for mandamus to restore her family's legacy and its place in Harmony's heart.
Thank you very much. Respondent, you may proceed with your opening statement.
Good afternoon, Your Honors. May it please the court. John Adams once said, "Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence." Your Honors, although you may be tempted to sympathize with Hollis Fitzpatrick's case today, you cannot deny the facts. Hollis Fitzpatrick was an incompetent businesswoman who made poor decisions for her already failing restaurant. While Hollis Fitzpatrick complained about the challenges many business owners faced, the government had a much bigger issue at hand. While a novel virus ravaged the planet, while people were dying by the thousands, Hollis Fitzpatrick showed no sign of comprehension at the regulations the government was forced to set. It is stated in the preamble of our very Constitution that the job of the government is to promote the general welfare. If this means setting regulations which all businesses have to comply with, then so be it. Hollis Fitzpatrick has no right to weasel her way out of mandates which are in place to ensure the safety of Buckeye citizens, for her stubbornness to not compromise. Today, the relator will fail to prove why the court should issue a writ of mandamus for a partial taking, showing why Fitzpatrick should not receive partial compensation. Hollis's business was failing for a long time. During the Great Recession, the restaurant was on the verge of closure. In early 2010, she hired a family friend to file Fitzpatrick's for bankruptcy under Chapter 11. This attorney did not specialize in bankruptcy filing and failed to turn in the requested paperwork in time. Consequently, the request was denied by the judge. This signals the start of a recurring pattern in which Hollis repeatedly hires inept individuals over the years. Furthermore, from 2012 to 2020, Fitzpatrick's was barely making any profits. Despite this, in 2015, Hollis spent significant funds in the renovation of the restaurant. In 2019, Hollis's accountant, longtime friend, and cousin, Phoenix Anderson, convinced Hollis to make even more significant investments. In order to pay for these, Hollis had to take out a loan to cover the expenses. While wasting money on pinball machines, which she believed would bring in a younger clientele, she received several severe citations from the health department. Then COVID-19 hit. Guidelines were set in place with the welfare of local businesses and their citizens as well. Your Honors, today the state will call upon Ms. Riley Jong and Dr. Ellis Mazikis. as Ms. Zhang, a successful real estate developer, will be able to tell you. She offered Fitzpatrick generous advice about her restaurant, which she chose to ignore. You will hear from Riley how Fitzpatrick's fall from grace was due to her own misguided decisions. Dr. Ellis Mazgis, a public health professional with years of experience, will tell you how the government had the safety of its citizens as a top priority. Dr. Mazgis will testify to Fitzpatrick's numerous flagrant violations of the health code. Together, they will help you see how Fitzpatrick was unwilling to change and adapt to the environment with the restrictions in place while many others were. The jurisprudence of this case rests on Penn Central v. New York. The Supreme Court outlined in this case that when government regulations are taken into question due to the alleged takings of a private property owner, one must look at these three factors. First, the economic impact of the regulation. Second, the extent of impact on investment. And third, the character of the actions taken. Everyone faced challenges during the pandemic, but one cannot deny the facts, no matter how they may appear. Fitzpatrick's may have been a beloved restaurant in Harmony, but its management was far from ideal, and this problem had been occurring for far longer than the pandemic had ever existed. The relator will fail to prove by preponderance of the evidence that a partial taking has occurred. We respectfully urge that the court deny Fitzpatrick's request for partial compensation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Bailiff, you may swear all witnesses in now as a group.
Will all witnesses and parties who are to give testimony in these proceedings please step to the front? Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and your testimony will comply with the rules of the Ohio Mock Trial Competition? Do you comply?
Yes.
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 Okay,
Thank you.
thanks very much. Second now. Relator, you may now present your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The relator would like to call Hollis Fitzpatrick to the stand. Good afternoon, Ms. Fitzpatrick. Would you please answer a few questions for the court today?
I'd be happy to.
Could you first state your full name for the court?
My name is Hollis Fitzpatrick.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, Ms. Fitzpatrick?
Yes. My life has revolved around Fitzpatrick's, a local family business in Harmony, my entire life, and I have a lot of fond memories from going there. So when my parents decided that they wanted to retire, I wanted to keep the family legacy going, so I started running the restaurant myself.
How did you run your family business?
My focus was always pleasing the customer, not pleasing my wallet. Food prices were low, so profit margins were slim, and I had to be as efficient as possible. Thanks to my efficiency, the profit margins were growing each year leading up to the pandemic at Fitzpatrick's.
Are there any specific changes you made to the business that led to the growing profit margin?
There were countless changes I made to Fitzpatrick's to increase the demographic to a younger crowd, and this did generate revenue for the restaurant.
Can you tell us specifically how you expanded Fitzpatrick's demographic to a younger crowd?
Yes, I did many things. I altered the menu, I switched to organic produce, I bought 2 pinball machines and a Sunday bar, and all of these changes added revenue and generated a younger crowd to the restaurant.
Thank you. May I ask, how is Fitzpatrick's doing today?
Fitzpatrick's sadly had to close. It was really difficult because I put a lot of time and money and work and effort into the restaurant, and now it's just gone.
How did Fitzpatrick's, a business you describe as growing in profit in the recent years, suddenly have to close?
The closure of Fitzpatrick's is due to the health department's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. the health department implemented restrictions that were completely unflexible and impossible to work around. And it made it so that Fitzpatrick's was unable to make a profit no matter what I tried to do.
What do you mean when you say no matter what you tried to do?
I mean, there was no way with these restrictions that Fitzpatrick's could continue on and make a profit with such harsh restrictions put in place. I mean, I tried everything I could to work around these. I consulted the Buckeye director of restaurants. I tried an industrial designer, and I even went and tried to find the maximum efficiency of the layout. And they all came out with the same answer that nothing I could do would be able to make it so that I could keep Fitzpatrick's going without being at a net loss.
How did the regulations have an effect on Fitzpatrick's capacity?
So the restaurants had to close at 6 p.m., which was in the middle of Fitzpatrick's dinner rush, and also when Fitzpatrick's generated most of the revenue. Plus, Fitzpatrick's customers were a little angry about the mask mandate, and we lost a lot of people from coming into the restaurant.
Objection.
Grounds?
Speculation. The witness has no knowledge of how their customers feel about certain mandates. These are feelings which the witness can't have any possible way of knowing.
Response?
Your Honor, the witness says in her thing that she had to, as the proprietor of the restaurant, she experienced firsthand as several customers got upset about the mask mandate and walked out because of it.
Okay, I'm going to sustain the objection, but I think you can rephrase that question.
Thank you,
All
Your
right.
Honor.
May I please rephrase the question?
You may.
Thank you. From your experience, how did the customers feel in regards to the mask? From what you saw, how did the mask mandate affect your business?
Well, some customers did not seem like they, in my opinion, from what I saw, it did not seem like they wanted to wear a mask. So a lot of people just did not come in due to that.
Thank you. If I was to show you a detailed layout of Fitzpatrick's floor plan, would you be able to recognize it?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to introduce the exhibit that has been previously stipulated as Exhibit D. Let the record reflect that I am showing both and a clean and unmarked copy to opposing counsel.
You may share your screen.
All right. All right. Ms. Fitzpatrick, how recent is this floor plan?
This was the floor plan that me and some colleagues put together to meet the government standards. It was, we had to, as you can see, it includes some investments that I made prior to the pandemic, and also a lot of seating that had to close due to the government standards.
Can you point out what you just mentioned that you called the investments?
Yes, there is 2 pinball machines in the bottom left-hand corner, and in the middle section, there's a sundae bar. I purchased these right before the pandemic because, I mean, I had no idea that the restaurant industry was going to change this much. And also, I thought that they seemed like a good idea because it would generate the younger crowd, and I thought maybe they would pay themselves off.
Thank you. What do the giant X's we see on the chart represent?
Those are the seats we had to close to meet the government standards. As you can see, we had to close 8 of our 12 counter seats, our 2-person table, 1 of our 3 booths, and 1 of our 2 4-person tables. This was just the best possible solution that I came up with to meet the restrictions.
Specifically, with the new layout, how many people could fit in Fitzpatrick's at once?
With the new layout, at max capacity, we could fit 16 customers. The older layout could fit more than double that at 34 customers.
Wow. Did you take any action to try to increase your capacity?
Yes, I reached out to the Buckeye Department of Health to request an exemption hearing.
You can put the exhibit away, Kat. Thank you. Ms. Fitzpatrick, why did you request an exemption hearing?
I requested an exemption hearing because it was impossible for Fitzpatrick's to stay open much longer. And I had also heard of the governor giving an exemption to a movie set. So I figured, why could Fitzpatrick's not have one as well?
When did you request this hearing for an exemption?
I requested this June 3rd, 2020.
If I was to give you a copy of the department's response to your request, would you recognize it?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to introduce the exhibit, which has been previously stipulated as Exhibit E. Let the record reflect that a clean and unmarked copy is being shown to opposing counsel. All right, Ms. Fitzpatrick. Could you summarize the response that you received from the Department of Health?
Yes. My request was simply denied. They said that there was no policy in place for exemptions, even though I had seen that the movie set had an exemption. So it was really frustrating.
Sounds frustrating. What was the date on the health department's reply?
It was almost a month later on June 29th, 2020.
And was this the only attempt you made to try to get Fitzpatrick's an exemption?
No, I tried again to get an exemption when I heard about the governor. He put out an announcement that he might open an exemption process. So I tried almost immediately when I heard about this.
If I was to give you a copy of this announcement, could you recognize it?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Your Honor, at this time, I would like to introduce the exhibit previously stipulated as Exhibit F. Let the record reflect that I am showing it to opposing counsel, and it's a clean and unmarked copy. Ms. Fitzpatrick, what is the date on this announcement?
The announcement was published on October 28th, 2020, which was 3 months after my first exemption request was denied.
Do you remember how you felt when you first read this update?
Yes, at this point, Fitzpatrick's was hanging on by a thread. When I read this update, it felt like a light at the end of the tunnel. The governor was finally recognizing the uniqueness of some restaurants like Fitzpatrick's. The governor himself even said how desperately restaurants needed this. Finally, I thought maybe Fitzpatrick's would make it out of this okay. I applied almost immediately after I heard about this announcement.
Can you give us the specifics of how soon you applied?
Yes, so the exemption policy opened on November 2nd, and I applied November 4th.
Thank you. Would you recognize the response the health department sent you regarding your second request for an exemption?
Yes.
All right, Your Honor, at this time, I would like to introduce the exhibit previously stipulated as Exhibit G. Let the record reflect that I am showing both clean and unmarked copy once again to opposing counsel. When did the health department get back to you, Ms. Fitzpatrick?
The health department got back to me over a month later on December 9th, 2020. This was more than half a year after my first exemption request was denied. And to add salt to the wound, I had noticed other restaurant owners who were close with the governor that were being replied like really quickly.
So after what you say is more than half a year, what response did the health department give you?
All they gave me was a slap in the face. They needed more information about obscure things, and therefore my request was pending. The only reason Fitzpatrick's was able to stay open to even hear a response back was because I had to let go of employees or they forewent paychecks. This is how the whole thing went down. Me desperately waiting for a response for the health department to save my beloved family business. And all they did was shove my restaurant aside as if it was nothing.
Wow. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Hello, Mrs. Fitzpatrick. I'm Tanisha Dockway, and today I'll be asking you some questions. If you would, please answer in a yes or no format. You will have a chance to elaborate in a redirect if your attorney chooses to do so. Can you answer in a yes or no fashion?
Um, I think that kind of depends. I'll try my best, but it depends on the question. Is it possible that I can elaborate a little bit if it's
You will have a chance to elaborate in your redirect, and I would prefer that you answer in a yes or no.
okay?
You were the owner of Fitzpatrick's, correct?
Yes.
And how long were you running Fitzpatrick's?
I for a pretty long time. I don't know. I don't know the exact. A long time.
And you once claimed that you never saw yourself running the place because you're more of a big picture person than a detail person. You said you found keeping track of details and staying on top of them to be an unpleasant feature of the boss. This is correct, right?
Yes, I did say that.
And do you personally believe that these aspects of being a boss are important in running a restaurant?
Well, I have hired people to look at certain details, and like most owners would say, you can't know everything that's going on.
And would you say that your partner is the main source of income in your family?
I wouldn't say the main source, but definitely a source of income. I mean, Fitzpatrick's brings in some.
And Mrs. Fitzpatrick, is that why you said, and I quote, "So you don't have to worry about bringing in too much money," in reference to your partner's job?
Yes, my partner definitely helps.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, before running the restaurant on your own, did you ever receive a degree in business or economics?
I did not.
And do you have any prior business experience?
Well, I did work at the restaurant when I was younger, so not as an owner, but I got to know the business in the restaurant really well.
And have you ever worked, and you've never worked under anyone with actual credentials in business? This is correct, right?
Yes.
Isn't it true that typical profit margins seen in the restaurant industry are between 3 to 5%?
Yes, this is true.
And isn't it true that Fitzpatrick's has always been on the low end of that, say around 3.5%?
Yes, I've always tried to keep food prices pretty low. That's how my parents ran it, and I wanted to keep that way.
Isn't it true that a restaurant needs profits to continue running?
Yes, we made profits, just not a lot.
And isn't it true that your margins have always been slim?
Yes.
Isn't it true that you tried to bring in new clientele with other methods, such as a new menu?
Yes.
And isn't it true that when you were updating this menu, that was a costly expense due to your specialty items, correct?
Yes, but it actually did help. It generated a lot of revenue from the new customers that came in for the menu, so.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that you have received $250,000 in loans from the government in PPLs?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you bought pinball machines, which were a significant spatial and financial investment?
That was before the pandemic, and at the time, Fitzpatrick's was doing really well, so it seemed like a great idea.
But at that time, your profit margins weren't past 3.5%, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And these pinball machines would have taken up enough space for, say, an additional table or booth, correct?
No, I actually looked at that, and it wouldn't, if we took away the pinball machines, it wouldn't have added any more seating.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, is it true that the majority of your staff members are family?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
You're frozen.
Sorry, everything on my end was frozen. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are now. You may proceed.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Could you please repeat your response, Mrs. Fitzpatrick?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. Isn't it true that the majority of your staff members were family?
Yes, that's true.
And what is the name of your accountant?
Phoenix.
Isn't it true that your accountant married your cousin?
Yes, this is true.
And even before their marriage, you were friends with Phoenix Anderson, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Response?
Your Honor, this is establishing the witness's bias.
Further response? Really hard.
I mean, the witness is the proprietor of the restaurant. Of course, they're going to have some bias towards the thing. I don't see how the relations to their accountant being their cousin-in-law affects the pandemic regulations or the taking of Fitzpatrick's business.
If I may respond.
Overruled. Overruled.
Thank
may
you, Your
proceed.
Honor.
Thank you. I'll repeat the question. Even before their marriage, you were friends with Phoenix Anderson, correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you filed for bankruptcy in 2010?
Yes, that was because of the Great Recession, which happened to a lot of small
And
businesses.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that you hired a family friend to file for bankruptcy?
Yes, that's true.
And this family friend did not specialize in bankruptcy filing, correct?
Yes.
And during the pandemic, isn't it true that all of your non-family employees were fired?
Yes. Again, because of the restrictions, I just had to let go of some employees.
But you kept all of your employees who were still family, correct?
Yes. that's
Objection. Asked and answered. The witness already answered this question.
I'm going to overrule the objection. Just so you know, my stance on asked and answered is that that relates to the cumulative evidence rule, and I don't believe that if it's asked twice or similarly twice, that it constitutes cumulative evidence. So overruled.
Okay,
But-
thank you, Your Honor.
Keep that in mind as we go on in the trial.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that you hired a high school student to design your website?
Yes, this is true. It didn't work out, but I was just trying my best to think of
And
some-
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that your business would have relied on this website?
Sorry, what did you just say?
Isn't it true that your business would have relied on this website to help you generate more profits?
It would have helped me generate more profits, yes.
And Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that you saw other businesses constructing online platforms during the pandemic?
Yes.
And to the best of your knowledge, were you aware if any of them hired high school students?
I have no idea. I can't.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, do you believe your website failed because of who you hired?
Objection, Your Honor. The question is out of scope of the witness's testimony.
Response?
Your Honor, in the witness's testimony, there are many mentions of the complaints that Hollis Fitzpatrick had, and the witness can reasonably extrapolate that these were due to the person they hired.
Okay, overruled. Please
All right,
proceed.
thank you.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, do you believe that your website failed because of the high school student you hired?
Yes, I would probably say it was the high school student.
And Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that you received a memo of the regulations from the health department at the start of the pandemic?
Yes.
Isn't it true that this memo included a list of suggestions of what and where to find materials to help adapt to the pandemic?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you ignored all of these suggestions, not including the actual requirements themselves?
Yes, because they wouldn't have helped in any way for Fitzpatrick's to stay open.
Your Honor, I move to strike the witness's testimony from the record as it is speculative.
Response?
Oh, am I supposed? Oh,
No, no, your attorney. You
No
have a
response,
motion
Your
to
Honor.
strike. Sustained. Please proceed.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, Did you receive any advice from Riley Jong before the pandemic on how to boost sales?
Yes, I did, but I didn't want to change my tradition and family legacy into a
And
fad.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that you didn't take any of their advice?
Yes.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that you wished your patrons weren't required to wear masks because they were frustrated with the mask mandate?
I never say yes, I wish that I could have pleased my customers, yes.
And at this time, were you aware of why masks help stave off the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes.
Your Honor, the record reflect that I'm showing opposing counsel and the witness a clean unmarked copy of Exhibit A, parts 1 through 4. Mrs. Fitzpatrick, do you recognize these documents?
Yes.
Could you explain what they are?
Sorry, it's the Exhibit A.
Yes.
These are the health department citations.
I would like to direct the court's attention to Part 1, Line 3. All 12 violations are willful, which is the most severe of the 4 types of violation designations. A willful violation is defined as a violation in which the employer either knowingly failed to comply with a legal requirement, purposeful disregard, or acted with plain indifference to employee safety. Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that this definition applies to you?
Yes, but my restaurant was still safe to patronize at, and still everyone was still allowed to eat there.
And Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that this is the most severe of the violations that you could have received?
Maybe, but people could still eat at my restaurant.
And
So I
Mrs.
think
Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that you received 12 violations in this category?
yes.
I would like to direct the court's attention to electrical and wiring. All electrical wiring and equipment not installed in a manner safe for use in hazardous location. Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that you did all of the electrical wiring of Fitzpatrick's yourself?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you have no prior electrical work experience as a profession?
No, I have no prior experience with that.
And isn't it true that you did not consult any professionals when taking up this endeavor?
No, I didn't, but my restaurant was still safe.
I would like to direct the court's attention to Part 4, flammable liquids. Improper classification of vessel based upon its flammable liquid capacity. Mrs. Fitzpatrick, were you aware of the danger that this presents to those in the vicinity?
I was not aware of the danger.
So, Mrs. Fitzpatrick, you were not aware that a fire hazard is a dangerous thing to have in your restaurant?
I was not aware that at the time that it was a fire hazard.
So you risked your customers and your staff due to your own actions, correct?
Yes, but the health department citations did not mean that I couldn't have people eat at my restaurant. So I don't think that these really matter that much if people were still allowed to eat there.
Yet, Mrs. Fitzpatrick, these are still all potential dangers to those in the vicinity. Is that or is that not true?
Yes, potential.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect, Mr. Stevens.
Yes, Your Honor, the relator does have a redirect.
Please proceed.
B- rating your restaurant received. What did this mean exactly?
It meant that although I made and did DIY projects myself, my restaurant was still safe to eat at. And it doesn't really matter if it's B-, you can still eat there.
Can you tell us why you chose to do these projects yourself?
Because I wanted to keep food prices low and I had to be as efficient as possible. And that's what I decided to do, was try and do a lot of things myself.
And what is your opinion on health inspections?
I think that the restaurant industry is
Did I hear
heavily,
an objection? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes. Your objection is?
Lack of personal knowledge.
Objection. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I apologize.
Response.
Thank you. The response is that she's a proprietor of a restaurant. She's been the proprietor of a restaurant for years. She's experienced several health inspections in her time. I think it's reasonable that she should have formed an opinion on these by now.
One more response?
Your Honor, the witness has no experience in health or anything related to that, so she cannot have a reasonable opinion on whether these inspections are actually useful to the safety of others.
Sustained. Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Did you ever have anything go wrong with the violations pointed out? Anyone injured, stuff like that?
No, no one was ever injured, and there's never issues with anything that I did myself. So,
All right. For the profit margin, how would you describe the profit margin leading up to the pandemic?
the profit margin was increasing each year leading up to the pandemic. The pandemic is when Fitzpatrick's was not able to profit.
And just even though your wife did make money, as you admitted on cross, you yourself were making profit from the restaurant leading up to the pandemic, correct?
Yes, we were both making money.
And Cross also pointed out that you don't consider yourself a detailed person. You did hire an accountant, though, to manage some of the details of your business. And can you tell us the name of, what was the name of this accountant again?
Phoenix?
And have you had any trouble with Phoenix being close to your cousin? Married specifically? All right. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Recross.
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Fitzpatrick, isn't it true that on the rating scale that the health department has set, a C means closure?
Yes.
And isn't it true that the rating which you received, a B minus, is just one grade above a C?
Yes, but it still means that we are safe to patronize.
And isn't it true that although you were making profits, your profit margins were incredibly slim and on the low end of the typical profit margins seen by most in the industry?
Yes, as I said earlier.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. The witness is excused. And relator, you may present your second witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the relator would like to call Finley Ibarra to the stand.
Okay.
May I proceed?
1 second. Yes, I need to complete my scoring here. You may proceed.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Finley Ibarra.
And what is your profession, Ms. Ibarra?
I'm the director of the Buckeye Restaurant Association.
And what is your relation to Relator Hollis Fitzpatrick?
Hollis is my client first and foremost, and he reached out to me after having economic troubles due to the pandemic restrictions.
So you said you were the director of the Buckeye Restaurant Association. Would you mind telling the court a bit more about your profession?
Yes, as director, I work to advocate for businesses of all sizes, large and small, on the local, state, and federal level. And I strive to create a thriving restaurant and food service community. I work really closely with health officials and congressional leaders to make sure that government regulation isn't too overreaching and that the food service industry and restaurant industry is stable.
And Ms. Ibarra, how did you get into this profession?
Well, I was appointed as director in 2010, but I've actually been interested in the restaurant and food service industry since high school. My first job was actually at Fitzpatrick's, bussing tables. And that sort of gave me a glimpse into the restaurant industry. And then I went to Cornell in the restaurant food service management program, and I graduated with a bachelor's degree in 1979. And yeah, from there I worked in insurance, trying to find plans for small restaurants. And I climbed up the corporate ladder, and eventually I was appointed as director of the Buckeye Restaurant Association.
So you said that you got your bachelor's degree from Cornell. What did you learn from getting this degree?
I learned cutting edge theories and very advanced strategies regarding marketing, leadership, and management in the restaurant and food service industry, and how to apply these to the real world.
And how did your education help you prepare for a career in the restaurant industry?
Well, right after college, I actually purchased a franchise, JoJo Sub Shop franchise. And I worked on that for a little bit until it actually failed due to the economic recession in the 80s. But I really think that that failure added a lot to my success later on because it gave me a lot of experience. And it also gave me a lot of firsthand knowledge about how a national economic recession can impact a specific industry.
And so since then, how long have you been working in the food industry?
On the corporate level, it's been about over 30 years, but I guess you could say I've been passionate about it ever since my first high school job.
Your Honor, at this time, under Rule 702, I move for Finley Ibarra to be qualified as an expert in the field of food industry management.
Any objections?
Not as long as she stays within that that range of questions.
That would be assumed, and the witness is permitted to testify as an expert. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Ms. Ibarra, are you familiar with the regulations the government imposed to combat COVID?
Yes.
And if I showed you a printout of these regulations, would you recognize it?
Absolutely.
Your Honor, I would like to present the witness with a copy of Exhibit C, which has been, and let the record reflect that I am showing opposing counsel a clean and unmarked copy. Carter, would you like me to share that, or do you have it?
Oh, I'm pulling it up. Sorry. Some technology issues. Can you rename the exhibit for me? You cut out for a second.
Exhibit C.
Say it one more time.
Exhibit C.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So I'd like to direct your attention to point 1. Would you mind reading the first sentence of it to the court?
Yes, but first, would you mind zooming in a little bit? I'm sorry, I can't see it that well. Thank you. Yes, all restaurants, bars, and banquet facilities and other like businesses and operations in the state which have on-site consumption of food, beer, wine, and liquor are permitted to reopen for full dine-in service within the state so long as all workplace safety standards are met.
And would you mind telling the court what some of the restrictions outlined in the exhibit are?
The ones that really stand out to me are the face coverings and the 6 feet between every table, the capacity restrictions, and the curfew that was placed as well.
Okay, thanks, Carter. You can put the exhibit away. So as the director of the Buckeye Restaurant Association, do you have an opinion on these restrictions?
Yes, absolutely. These restrictions, it doesn't seem like the government really thought about how they would impact businesses of all different sizes and with different resources. Restrictions like these are more severe than anything the restaurant industry has ever seen. So it can present a hurdle to small mom and pop businesses like Fitzpatrick's with really small spaces and who rely on a lot of regulars in their customer base. And also like the capacity.
Speculation.
Response?
The witness is qualified to speak about how these regulations have affected small businesses in Buckeye, considering that they are the director of the Buckeye Restaurant Association.
I will overrule the objection. I think that's within the scope of her status as an expert witness. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Since Fitzpatrick is one of your clients, would you mind elaborating on how the regulations affected Fitzpatrick specifically?
Yes. Well, I worked really closely with Hollis Fitzpatrick to try and maximize the space and find the most efficient business model that would create a profit. But with all of my experience and the resources that I could use, there was nothing that he could do to profit while complying with the regulations, especially due to the capacity and the curfew that cut out about 1/3 of his dinner rush time.
And so, in your expert opinion, were the capacity restrictions justified considering the detriment they caused to small businesses in Buckeye?
Well, I do understand that public health is very important and we all need to stay safe during this pandemic. However, it doesn't seem to me like the government really took into account how it would impact businesses of all sizes, like I said. And I watched a lot of small businesses struggle, and it was really saddening, especially to see businesses like Fitzpatrick's and Fitzpatrick's itself be erased in one swipe. So I really think that that's unacceptable, especially because it was due to these government restrictions. And I think moving forward, they need to know that this is not a one-size-fits-all situation.
And based on the impact of the regulations, as director, do you think that restaurants will ever be able to recover?
Honestly, it's hard for me to say. With all the uncertainty of what the government might do and how these restrictions went the first time around, watching all of them struggle, it's hard to tell if they will ever be able to fully recover financially. And it's sad because these small businesses are constants in the community across Buckeye.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Cross-examination.
All right, 1 second. Okay. May it please the court. Ms. Abra, my name is Alyssa Ettinger, and I'm going to be asking you a few questions today. I request that you answer these in a yes or no fashion, as you will have opportunity to elaborate and redirect examination if your attorney chooses to conduct one.
Yes, I understand where you're coming from. I do think as an expert, it will be hard for me to give the full length and breadth of my expertise in my answers if it's only yes or no, but if that's what you would like, then I can answer with just yes or no.
Thank you. You've been closely tied to Fitzpatrick's for a long time, correct?
Correct.
In fact, you got your first job at their restaurant, yes?
Yes.
So would you then consider yourself well acquainted with the business?
Yes.
And so since you're familiar enough, you would know that they are not that money making was never their focus.
Yes, they were definitely more of a family-oriented, safe place and a place where the community could gather.
You even had conversations with an accountant that implied that, but if some inheritance monies, the restaurant would never be able to survive.
Yes.
All right. You attended Cornell for Food Industry Management program, correct?
Yes.
You got your bachelor's degree from that school, correct?
Yes, as I said.
So isn't it true that a lot of your educational background surrounds knowing what leads to businesses' success or failure?
Yes.
So you've seen business models that are ultimately ineffective, yes?
Yes.
All right. Isn't it true that in your deposition, you referred to Fitzpatrick's as a business that was barely making it when times were good?
Yes.
Fitzpatrick's always stayed the same, correct?
Yes.
You also stated that in your deposition that eventually Fitzpatrick's reached a point of profit margins within the industry standards of 3 to 5, yes?
Yes.
But isn't it true that they were on the lower end of that range?
Yes, but they were still in the range.
All right. Moving on. Isn't it true that during the big freeze of 77, Fitzpatrick's delivered food to those who needed it?
Yes.
And isn't it also true that they did the exact same thing in the Great Blizzard of 78?
Yes.
But Fitzpatrick's supposedly could not have the same resources to set up delivery systems in their own time of crisis, yes?
Yes.
All right. Speaking about systems that weren't able to be set up by Fitzpatrick's, there were also no outdoor dining set up in response to COVID-19 restrictions, correct?
Correct.
These options would have generated greater revenue, yes?
Yes.
You have personal experience with a restaurant failing due to limited seating, correct?
Correct.
This was your business, JoJo's Sub Shop, yes?
Yes, correct.
Were there government regulations imposed that also led to the failure of JoJo's Sub Shop?
Not exactly. It was during the economic recession in the early 80s, so it was not really the hand of the government that was closing my business. It was just the economic recession.
All right. You stated in your deposition that the time restriction in restaurants closing by 6 p.m. imposed by the government eliminated revenue, correct?
Correct.
You said that the restaurants made approximately 60% of their revenue from dinner services, correct?
Correct.
You also stated that the curfew cut out 1/3 of the business's busiest time, yes?
It cut out 1/3 of Fitzpatrick's busiest time, more specifically.
All right. Fitzpatrick closed at 8 p.m., correct?
Yes, when I worked there, it did.
However, with your distinct history surrounding Fitzpatrick's, you also stated that Fitzpatrick's typically became quiet enough for cleanup at around 7:30, yes?
Yes, when I worked there in high school, yeah.
So it's true that Fitzpatrick's rush was shortened by only an hour and a half, correct?
Yep, when I was in high school.
Did you think there were other ways for the government to address the pandemic?
Personally, I think there were ways that they could maybe accommodate smaller businesses and ways they could do that, yes.
However, you yourself stated that your industry agreed that it was important to support aggressive steps to protect the nation's public health, yes?
Yes, and it's also my job to advocate for restaurants when government regulation is overreaching.
All right, that is all.
Okay, redirect examination, Ms. McAndrew.
Yes. Ms. Ibarra, would you mind explaining the differences in the situations between the closure of JoJo's Sub Shop versus the closure of Fitzpatrick's?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously they were very different. First of all, I had JoJo's Sub Shop right out of college. So that was decades ago. And that was during the 80s economic recession, which wasn't as severe as the pandemic restrictions or the recession that came with it. So it closed due to that. And also mine was a franchise, and Fitzpatrick's is obviously one isolated business.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any recross at all?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. Witnesses excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Give me a second while I complete my scoring here. Okay, respondent, you may begin and call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We'd like to call Dr. Alice Mazikis. May it please the court. Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the court and spell your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Dr. Ellis Mazikis. That's spelled Ellis, E-L-L-I-S, Mazikis, M-A-Z-A-K-I-S.
And what is your occupation?
I'm the director of the Buckeye Department of Health and Human Services.
Could you explain your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree in health services from the University of Arizona, a master's degree in public health, and an MD with an emphasis in epidemiology, both from Buckeye State University.
And what experience do you have working with the department?
After I graduated from the University of Arizona in 1994, I immediately began working for the department. For 20 years while working there, I continued to further my education, and in 2014, I was nominated for the director's position, and I've been in that seat since.
What are some of the responsibilities of the department and your responsibilities as its director?
The responsibilities of the department include drafting policies and other restrictions that relate to the health and safety of the public in Buckeye. We must deal with policies related to medical care, food and drug, and disease prevention and control. My own responsibilities as the director are to oversee and partake in the development of these policies, to work together with my team members throughout the process, and to enforce the mission of the department.
And do you or your department interact with the various restaurants of Buckeye?
Yes, of course.
How so?
The department works to create the Health and Food Code of Buckeye. The Food Code is a set of regulations that the restaurants of Buckeye must abide by to provide safe services to their customers.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to qualify Dr. Ellis Mazikis as an expert witness in public health administration.
Sorry,
Your
Your
Honor.
Honor, you're on mute. Oh.
Sorry, I had a cough. Any objections?
No objections at this time.
Okay, the witness is permitted to testify as an expert. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Before the events of COVID-19, what were your first interactions with the relator, Hollis Fitzpatrick?
As I had mentioned before, the department helps to create the Health and Food Code of Buckeye. Every restaurant in Buckeye receives a certain grade based upon these standards to make sure that the public knows that a restaurant is safe to visit. In January of 2020, Fitzpatrick's received a B- rating as a result of their inspection.
Could you please state the violations that led to Fitzpatrick's B- rating?
Fitzpatrick's received a B- rating because the inspector cited violations for plumbing, their employee hand washing signs were faded and in need of replacement, and Fitzpatrick's was using their own home produce instead of produce from an approved vendor.
And how does this B- compare to the rating scale you use?
The rating scale that we use for the Health and Food Code of Buckeye is only from an A to a C. So a B- is right above a C, which would be a closure.
How did the department respond to news of the global pandemic?
The department initially closed everything down, and we issued a stay-at-home order because of the highly contagious nature of COVID-19. We later revised and allowed certain businesses to reopen, such as restaurants. As a result of the pandemic, these businesses couldn't reopen normally and had to follow a set of restrictions in order to keep the health of the people safe.
Could you elaborate on the restrictions that were imposed upon restaurants?
The department's restrictions included every other table must remain empty and there must be 6 feet between all tables. The total number of occupants, including kitchen staff and customers, must be reduced to half or 50% of the normal capacity. There must be plexiglass installed between tables and at the counter. Physical menus are not allowed. The restaurants must close to in-person dining by 6 p.m., and all customers and staff must wear masks. These restrictions were put in place to help control the spread of COVID-19 while still allowing restaurants to reopen and continue providing their services to the public.
How did you come up with these restrictions?
To come up with these restrictions, the department and I worked together with local restaurant owners to determine which restrictions would be the least burdensome on restaurants but still protect the public health.
And how did you communicate the aforementioned restrictions with the restaurants?
The department actually issued a memo to restaurants, including the restrictions and what they needed to do to comply with them. It included recommendations to help them comply with these restrictions, such as locations to obtain plexiglass, how to develop a virtual menu, and ways to maximize seating arrangements in small spaces. At the time, some businesses had requested exemptions from these restrictions, but it wasn't possible. We didn't have a structure in place to process exemptions, but it also wasn't safe to allow them this early. The plan of the department was always to reevaluate at a later time as it was safer.
Dr. Moskos, based on reliable public health certainty, do you have an expert opinion on the extent of these restrictions?
Yes, I do.
What is your opinion?
The restrictions that the department implemented were necessary and they were not at all burdensome. There were also other things that restaurants could have done to make more profit during these times to help them.
So then, when did you start opening up exemptions to the public?
On October 28th, 2020, I believe, Governor DeBeer announced the exemption process during a press conference, and it went live a few days later on November 2nd. There were so many applications pouring in that we had to begin processing them around the clock. We attempted to respond to these requests as quickly as possible, but it would often take us several weeks to notify these businesses of their application statuses.
What were you looking for in applications for exemptions?
We looked for restaurants and other businesses in large enough spaces where the capacity and distancing restrictions weren't necessary. We looked for businesses and restaurants with significant ventilation and airflow. The exemptions the department issued were on a case-by-case basis, and they were only granted if the businesses could prove safe operation without the restrictions in place.
Did you receive Fitzpatrick's application for an exemption after they were open to the public?
We did receive an application for exemption from Fitzpatrick's. However, we often needed more information before we could make a final decision, which was also the case with Fitzpatrick's. After we had notified them that we needed additional information, we never received any follow-up.
While creating the regulations, what was the top priority of the health department?
These regulations were put in place to protect the public health. That was our main intention and our priority during this time.
Did the health department keep the welfare of local businesses in mind as well as the safety of its citizens?
Yes, the restrictions we implemented were crucial in preventing the further spread of COVID-19 and were for the protection of the people of Buckeye. While such operations may not be ideal in the food service industry, it's better for restaurants to be open with minimal restrictions than to be closed altogether. The citizens of the state of Buckeye are all in this together, and while things may not be ideal, they're in place to provide for a safer, healthier, and brighter tomorrow.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Moskos. No further questions, Your Honors.
Okay, thank you. Cross-examination, Mr. Stevens, I guess.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Mazakis. Are you able to answer a few questions regarding the pandemic regulations and their effect on Fitzpatrick's?
Yes.
Do you think you would be able to confine your answer into a simple yes or no when possible?
I will attempt to do so when it is appropriate.
Thank you. Ms. Mazakis, have you ever dealt with the pandemic prior to COVID-19?
I have not.
Is it fair to say then that you are not an expert on pandemic response nor an expert on the virus COVID-19 during your initial rollout of the COVID-19 closures and regulations?
During the initial rollout, no one was an expert. It was very new and no one knew what was happening at the time.
When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the governor closed restaurants. Your organization initially advised that restaurants stay closed for over 2 months, correct?
Yes, we did, to protect the health of the people of Buckeye.
So is it fair to say that in making this recommendation, your organization did not even give restaurants the opportunity to figure out how to provide safe service during the pandemic?
with how quickly the virus was spreading, giving them the opportunity would have just allowed for more spread of the virus. So no, we did not.
No, you did not. In your direct, you brought up Fitzpatrick's B- rating, right?
Yes, I did.
Did you personally inspect Fitzpatrick's?
No, I did not.
So is it fair to say you have no firsthand knowledge on Fitzpatrick's unique situation?
I have no firsthand knowledge of that. I do not.
And for the knowledge of the court, a B- rating means that a restaurant is still safe to patronize and poses no immediate threat, right?
It's not recommended, but it is still considered safe. Yes.
Thank you. Your organization's webpage has information regarding the governor's orders about closing and reopening businesses, right?
Yes,
If I presented you with a copy, would you recognize it?
I would. Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to present Exhibit B, the Buckeye Department of Health webpage. Let the record reflect that a clean and unmarked copy has been shown to opposing counsel. All right, thank you, Kat. Can I direct your attention to the bottom of the page where the governor's orders to close restaurants is listed? Can you read the date of this closing for the court? Is that Exhibit B? I'm trying to look. Oh.
No, it was not. My apologies.
I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay. Sorry, Your Honor, it's technical difficulties. All right, I'll ask the question again if you don't mind. Can I direct your attention to the bottom of the page where the governor's orders to close restaurants is listed? Can you read this date out loud for the court?
Could you zoom in on it? That date looks to be March 15th, 2020.
And the first industry your department closed was the food industry, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Turn your attention to the row third from the bottom where the governor ordered the reopening of the food industry. What is the date on this?
The third from the bottom.
Yes, where it says the governor ordered to reopen. Maybe it's third from the top, my bad.
Okay. That is May 21st, 2020.
Thank you. And the last industry that was reopened was the food industry, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. You can put away the exhibit. Now, if I was to show you a copy of the governor's orders for reopening restaurants, which features your name next to the governor's at the top, would you recognize it?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to present Exhibit C, the Buckeyes governor's orders for reopening restaurants. Note that I am showing opposing counsel a clean and unmarked copy. Your organization helped create these restrictions, yes?
My department did help to create restrictions relating COVID-19. We did.
So it's fair to say that you're familiar with these documents?
Yes, I am.
Is there anywhere on the list of regulations that considers the unique characteristics of certain restaurants, such as airflow, spacing, layout, and more, or is it more of a generalization?
I believe it would be more of a generalization.
And this document applied the same to all restaurants, correct?
Yes, all restaurants received the exact same set of restrictions.
Thank you. You can put away the evidence now. Are you aware that certain establishments were exempted by the governor from these restrictions, such as the Rural Meyer movie set, where food and drink was allowed to be served 24/7? And at the time this exemption was given, specifically for your information, March 19th, 2020, were all restaurants able to apply for similar exemptions?
Restaurants were not able to apply for exemptions at that time.
Thank you. If I was to present you with a copy of a response from your organization to Ms. Fitzpatrick's request for an exemption hearing, are you able to answer questions about the context of the message?
Yes, I can.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to present Exhibit E, the first letter from the Buckeye Department of Health to Ms. Fitzpatrick. Note that a clean and unmarked copy is being shown to opposing counsel. Could you read aloud the first sentence of your organization's response for the court?
Your request for a hearing regarding exemptions from the state-mandated COVID-19 safety protocols has been received and subsequently denied.
And your organization got back to Ms. Fitzpatrick's 26 days after the request was sent, right?
Looks like it, yes.
Thank you. You can put away the exhibit now. Appreciate it. A month later, on November 2nd, 2020, your organization did finally end up putting an exemption process in place, yes?
Yes, we did.
If I was to give you a copy of your organization's response to Ms. Fitzpatrick's second application, would you once again be able to answer a few questions about the context and date of the exhibit?
Yes.
All right. Your Honor, at this time, I would like to present Exhibit G, the second letter from the Buckeye Department of Health to Fitzpatrick's. Note that a clean and unmarked copy is being shown to opposing counsel. Ms. Fitzpatrick sent you their second request on November 4th, 2020, right?
Yes.
And the date of your organization's reply is over a month later on December 9th, correct?
Yes.
And this date is over half a year after Ms. Fitzpatrick initially reached out for an exemption, is it not?
We weren't initially allowing exemptions at the original time that they had reached out, so yes.
Yes. Can you read aloud the second sentence of your organization's response? It starts with application.
Application status is pending.
So would you agree that it's an undisputed fact that over half a year of trying to get an exemption, Ms. Fitzpatrick still had no definite yes or no answer as to if the restaurant could get an exemption?
Well, a month before, we had just opened up actual exemptions for all of the restaurants. It seems we didn't have enough information at this time, and before we didn't have enough information about the virus itself to open exemptions to restaurants.
So yes, it's a fact, or no, it's not a fact?
Yes.
Thank you for your time. No further questions at this point.
Okay. Redirect examination.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Dr. Mazakis, could you explain to the court why you have no prior experience with pandemics?
There hasn't been a pandemic for about a century. I don't think anyone besides myself would be able to say that they do have experience with pandemics in this situation.
And could you elaborate to the court what degrees you received?
I have a bachelor's degree in health services from the University of Arizona, a master's degree in public health, and an MD with an emphasis in epidemiology, both from Buckeye State University.
And Dr. Mazakis, is a B- rating safe to is it safe to patronize a restaurant with a B- rating?
It's definitely not recommended, but it is still considered safe.
So with public health certainty, would you recommend Fitzpatrick's to those who may have concerns about its safety?
I would not recommend Fitzpatrick's to anyone.
And Dr. Mazakis, did all restaurants have the same set of restrictions?
All restaurants had the exact same set of restrictions to protect public health.
And why were some restaurants not given different restrictions?
As I had said, all restaurants were given the exact same set of restrictions to protect public health from COVID-19.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Recross examination.
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. So the witness is excused. Respondent, you may present your second witness.
We'd like to call Ms. Riley Zhang. May it please the court. Hello, Ms. Zhang. All right. Please introduce yourself to the court, Ms. Zhang.
My name is Riley Zhang, and I'm one of the top real estate developer in Harmony.
And what does your occupation as a real estate developer involve?
Well, my company, Zhang Real Estate specifically, we are at the top of design curve, and we're also known to help businesses that are average or struggling to thrive by providing them new spaces.
And why are you here today?
To give a testimony on behalf of the state of Buckeye.
What does your job have to do with this case?
I had some interactions with Fitzpatrick when I visited the restaurant back in 2018.
All right. What qualifications do you have?
Well, I graduated from Buckeye State University with a Bachelor of Science in Finance. Then I studied and received my real estate license in 2008. After that, I gained a few years of experience with real estate, and now I own a successful business myself.
And what's that experience in real estate that you have?
I had many years of experience working in different companies, like the Wilmot Development, and have owned a company myself for 5 years. I've worked on many projects that are well known and successful, such as Weston Town Center, an extremely popular outdoor shopping center in Harmony, and The Birch. It's a development offering apartments, popular restaurants, and office space.
All right. At this time, I'd like to qualify this witness as an expert in real estate development and finance.
Any objection, Ms. McAndrew?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, the witness will be permitted to testify as an expert. You may proceed.
All right. What interactions with Fitzpatrick have you had?
Well, I was looking at the local areas of Harmony and I found Fitzpatrick's really interesting, so I approached her in 2018. I offered them a great opportunity to be part of my upcoming development. I also gave them some suggestions as to how they can improve their business.
What were some of those suggestions that you gave them?
I suggested that she changed the restaurant into a fast casual restaurant because there will be less food waste, not as much employees needed. She would still be able to sell the same food she sold. And most importantly, it will attract more customers.
And can you elaborate what exactly a fast casual restaurant is?
Well, a fast casual restaurant will be fewer sit-down tables, more takeout. And a famous example will be the McArches.
All right. What were Fitzpatrick's reactions?
Well, when I mentioned my proposal and suggestions to Fitzpatrick, she seemed to be completely offended. She even went on to give a whole speech of how great their restaurant is and didn't need any changes for improvement.
What happened next?
So after my proposal, I asked to look at the restaurant's finance.
And what exactly did you observe when you looked at those finances?
Well, I saw that the restaurant's profit margin was really low. It could barely make it through the year. I also brought in a forensic accountant, and their report came to the same conclusion as mine.
What exactly is a forensic accountant?
Well, a forensic accountant, usually they use their skills and profession to examine someone's or a business finance to figure out what's wrong.
All right. What, if anything, did Fitzpatrick do to increase her revenue?
Based on my observations, she introduced some healthier options to the menu to attract a younger crowd.
All right. What happened after you looked at her finances?
Well, after I saw their finance, I went to talk to Fitzpatrick for one last time with my last and best offer, but she still refused to consider my suggestions, so I stopped approaching Fitzpatrick and said no deal.
Ultimately, do you believe it was the right decision to stop approaching Fitzpatrick?
I believe it was definitely the right decision. I tried to help Fitzpatrick every way possible, giving her multiple proposals, but she just refused to be helped by me.
Did you ever have any other interaction with Fitzpatrick again?
Yes, but not directly. I just love their cheese fries a lot, so I tried to find them again on door delivery.
Were these on door delivery?
They were not on door delivery or any other online app, which every other restaurant that competes with Fitzpatrick is available on.
All right, moving on. Do you have an opinion based on your expertise in real estate development and finance certainty?
Yes, definitely.
And what exactly is this opinion, Ms. Zhang?
In my expert opinion, her fate seemed to be avoidable. If she had taken any of my suggestions or was more open-minded about making changes to her to improve her restaurant, then Fitzpatrick's wouldn't have ended up closing. An example would be Mickey's ice cream. They weren't doing well before the pandemic, but with my help and by adapting to restrictions, they were able to do good during the pandemic, and now I'm helping them find a second location.
Thank you for your time, Ms. Zhang. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. Cross-examination, Ms. McAndrew,
May I proceed?
you may.
Good afternoon, Ms. Zhang. Would you mind answering a few questions to give more background about your dealings with Hollis Fitzpatrick?
Sure.
And I would also like to request that you keep your answers as concise as possible for the sake of clarity.
I'll try my best.
Thank you. First, let's talk about your experience with Fitzpatrick. So tell me, you made several offers to Ms. Fitzpatrick in an attempt to purchase her restaurant, correct?
Well, I did, and also to help improve their business. Yes.
And you thought that Fitzpatrick's was in need of a business remodel, correct?
Based on observations, yes.
Okay. And you, as mentioned in direct, suggested that they transition to a fast casual restaurant style to maximize profit.
Yes.
Were you aware that over the past few years prior to the pandemic, Fitzpatrick's had been making a profit?
Well, as I said, they were in the lower end of the profit margin, so I tried to help them improve business.
But they were still making a profit, correct?
As I stated, in the lower end, but yes.
I just need a yes or no answer.
Yes.
So back to your relationship with Ms. Fitzpatrick, would I be correct in saying that Hollis had declined all of your many offers?
Yes.
However, Hollis did make a counteroffer, did she not?
Can you please repeat the question?
Hollis did make a counteroffer, did she not?
Well, yes.
And after she made her counteroffer, you declined it and did not attempt to negotiate any further with Ms. Fitzpatrick, correct?
Well, they refused all the offers, so I just went off.
Yes, after you declined their counteroffer, correct?
Well, can you specify?
In your witness statement, you say that Ms. Fitzpatrick made an offer and you called it unreasonably high and then declined it. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Zhang, would I be correct in saying that you are a real estate agent?
Of course.
And may I ask, have you had any experience operating or owning a restaurant yourself?
Well, I have experience working with many restaurants, so.
Yes, but as a real estate agent, you do not work directly like inside the restaurant, managing it or anything like that?
Well, I don't work directly for a restaurant, but I worked with many restaurants.
And you were aware that, my apologies. So to you, it was appalling that Ms. Fitzpatrick might want a higher sum of money for her generation-old family business that had been financially struggling?
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes. So after you declined Hollis Fitzpatrick's counteroffer, would it be strange that Ms. Fitzpatrick might want a higher sum of money because her business had been financially struggling?
Well, to help keep their family business making a better profit will be very helpful.
Right, and part of that profit could have come if you had made a better offer to buy their business, correct? But you didn't attempt to make any other offers after Hollis requested a higher sum of money?
Well, my last offer, I believe, was a very decent offer, but they still refused. So I just went off.
Okay, let's move on. So in your direct, you mentioned working with other restaurants such as Mickey's Ice Cream Parlor.
Correct.
And then in your witness statement, you also mentioned working with a pizza parlor that was also doing well during the pandemic.
Yes.
So the small pizza parlor was run out of someone's private kitchen and not a physical restaurant, correct?
Yes.
And Mickey's Ice Cream Parlor is not a sit-down restaurant either, correct?
Yes.
And you've been to Fitzpatrick's many times before, so if I showed you a diagram of the restaurant, you would recognize it, right?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would like to present the witness with a copy of Exhibit D.
Okay. You may share your screen.
Okay. Thank you. So from this diagram, you can see that Fitzpatrick's is a sit-down restaurant, correct?
Yes.
And as a sit-down restaurant, the struggles that Fitzpatrick faced during the pandemic would not be the same as Mickey's Ice Cream Parlor or the at-home pizza designer, correct?
Well, that is exactly why back in 2018, I suggested them to change into a fast casual to reduce, since they don't have enough space in their sit-down restaurant.
Yes, but that was long before the pandemic, and so clearly Hollis would not be thinking about that in terms of maximizing capacity, correct?
Yes.
So, and from what you noted from your many visits to Fitzpatrick's, it would be fair to say that part of what kept Fitzpatrick's afloat was its regulars who stopped by for a sit-down meal.
Well, Fitzpatrick also tried to attract a younger crowd and that is exactly why a sit-down table will attract, a fast casual will attract more customers.
Yes, but I'm really just talking generally. You noted yourself, it was Fitzpatrick's regulars who came in for a sit-down meal that helped keep them running the restaurant.
Yes.
And so even to somebody like you who doesn't work in the health industry, you could see how business closures and capacity limits would hurt this business regardless of whether or not it had taken your advice.
Well, if he had taken the advice of changing to a fast casual to reduce the amount of space they need, as I said, their fate was avoidable, so they won't be today.
Yes, however, I'm talking about compared to the other businesses that you mentioned that succeeded during the pandemic, regardless of whether or not Fitzpatrick's had adapted to the way that you suggested them to, a sit-down business in any respect would not have been able to make a profit considering the regulations, correct?
Well, yes.
I'm just looking for a yes or no answer.
Yes, I said.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Any redirect, pardon me.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, then. Witness is excused. We've come to the end of both cases in chief. Therefore, at this time, timekeepers, please give us 2 minutes for the attorneys who are presenting closing arguments to get prepared.
The 2 minutes is up.
Minutes. Okay. Therefore, Relator, you may begin your closing argument.
All right. Sorry, I was busy. I have it. All right, here we go. Sorry. Your Honor, Mr. and Miss Prosecuting Attorneys, may it please the court. Closing of Fitzpatrick marked the end of a family legacy, a legacy that survived through decades, even through the Great Recession of 2008, just not through the pandemic restrictions. My client, Hollis Fitzpatrick, bravely testified under oath today about the most difficult decision of their life, closing their family-owned restaurant forever. Fitzpatrick told you all today what led to this tragedy, how they struggled doing whatever they could to stay afloat during their restrictions, but to no avail. The duty of our civil justice system is to provide compensation to wronged individuals and allow them to hold others accountable for their actions and their consequences. In this case, governmental regulations went too far and clearly infringed upon my client's Fifth Amendment rights, constituting a partial regulatory taking. In Penn Central versus the City of New York, 3 pillars were used to determine when regulations go too far: the economic impact, the interference with reasonable investment-backed expectations, and the character of governmental actions. We had the burden of proof, and there is ample evidence to prove the government regulations went too far. First, the restrictions had an economic impact shown by the lost net income approach. Fitzpatrick had been making a steady profit before the restrictions, but weren't afterwards. The reason for this discrepancy are the pandemic restrictions alone. Hollis Fitzpatrick testified how the regulations forced Fitzpatrick to operate at a net loss, less than half capacity, close during their rush hour, and turn away guests, all of which made it impossible for Fitzpatrick's to make a profit. According to food industry expert Finley Ibarra, the restrictions were overreaching and inconsistent, which is what caused them to push Fitzpatrick's over the edge. Today, the state has argued against these facts using only the word of Today, the state has argued against these facts using the testimony of a real estate agent who has no experience operating a restaurant, nor has she ever worked in Fitzpatrick's. Furthermore, this real estate agent, Riley Jane, demonstrated a clear bias against Fitzpatrick's on the stand due to Hollis being the one holdout in their attempt to buy all of Main Street, where the restaurant is located. Secondly, the restrictions interfered with my client's reasonable investment-backed expectations. In this case, the restrictions caused Hollis Fitzpatrick to lose money on their restaurant and the various improvements made shortly before the restrictions. Hollis testified today about their purchase of various improvements, such as the ice cream bar, which they studied to ensure these improvements would increase their revenue, assuming no major change occurred. However, a major change occurred in the COVID-19 restrictions, which closed businesses completely before these improvements could pay off the loan. These restrictions warrant interference with reasonable investment-backed expectations, as Hollis Fitzpatrick was not aware of them when he purchased the restaurant and the improvements, nor could he have reasonably anticipated them. Additionally, the restrictions were of a different nature than any restaurant regulation before them, as they were made in a rush to combat an unimaginable threat, a global pandemic. Lastly, while the government did have some reason for putting pandemic regulations in place, that does not justify the undue and unbearable weight put on Fitzpatrick's and other family-owned restaurants. For starters, restaurants were singled out as they were the first to close, but the last to reopen. Worst of all, closing a restaurant should be the last step, as it completely blocks the restaurant from making any profit. The government's choice to close restaurants was completely too harsh. They used a bazooka to kill a fly. Furthermore, the character of the restrictions targeted Fitzpatrick and other family-owned businesses, as the restrictions had less of an effect on larger chain restaurants. Hollis Fitzpatrick today talked about their inability to benefit from the new reopening restrictions, as her restaurant did not have outdoor seating and was significantly smaller than most restaurants, and therefore could not fit enough people to stay in business. It's unfair to assume one size shoe fits all, but that's exactly what the government did when they set up a universal policy for a variety of restaurants to follow. Restaurants needed an exemption policy to account for this variety. Fitzpatrick tried desperately to get this very exemption policy. In fact, she communicated back and forth with the Department of Health for over half a year and was left waiting for months at a time to hear a response. Furthermore, after this half a year, the department still hadn't given Ms. Fitzpatrick a yes or no answer. The communication between the two parties ended not because Ms. Fitzpatrick got the exemption hearing she wanted, but because the restaurant could no longer stay open and closed for good. The evidence weighs in favor of the
Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Respondent, closing statement.
All right. May it please the court. Now, your honors, Hollis Fitzpatrick sat idly by while her business was failing due to her own indifference. With all the facts laid out, it is hard to deny that Hollis Fitzpatrick was incompetent and made the wrong decisions for her business. The two witnesses we called today help us prove these points. They showed that Hollis Fitzpatrick is a stubborn person who was unwilling to make compromise. Ms. Riley Zhang offered Hollis Fitzpatrick advice to improve her business, but as Ms. Zhang said, Hollis Fitzpatrick refused to listen to any of her suggestions. After Zhang hires her own independent forensic accountant to review Fitzpatrick's financials, which are in terrible condition, showing that Fitzpatrick was already a failing business, barely able to scrape by. Ms. Zhang proved how Hollis Fitzpatrick's bad decisions were a direct cause of her business failure. Hollis Fitzpatrick decided to take matters into her own hands and do the plumbing and wiring of her restaurant herself, receiving the most severe violations. Also, because of this, Hollis received a B- citation from the health department before the COVID-19 pandemic even started. A B- is one step above a C, which would mean closure. Once the pandemic hit, Hollis Fitzpatrick's stubborn ways showed their face yet again. This was proven from the testimony of Dr. Ellis Mazikis. Even when the rest of the world was suffering with the pandemic, Hollis Fitzpatrick thought of herself as a higher priority than others when she requested an exemption from the restrictions on June 3rd, 2020, even though this was not possible at that time. When all of these wrongdoings finally caught up to Hollis, she was forced to close down her restaurant on December 12th. As Penn Central versus New York established, when government regulations are taken into question due to the alleged takings of a private property owner, there are three factors one must look at for this. First, the economic impact of the regulation. Second, the extent of impact on investments. And third, the character of the actions taken. The economic impact was big, but these restrictions were not solely directed at Hollis Fitzpatrick. Again, these restrictions were not the only impact that caused the closure of Fitzpatrick's, but one among the many that finally caught up to Hollis. The character of the actions taken was for the safety of the citizens of Buckeye. The preamble of our very Constitution states that the job of the government is to promote the general welfare. These restrictions were put into place to do just that. The pandemic was truly hard on everyone, but it was not the only thing that brought along Fitzpatrick's demise. It was one factor among the mismanagement of money, the unwillingness to make change, and the overall stubbornness of Hollis Fitzpatrick. These have been going on for much longer than the pandemic. The economic impact of the pandemic restrictions and the extent of the governmental action all weigh against the finding of a taking. Facts are stubborn things, but the facts of this case prove that the realtor has not satisfied their burden of preponderance of the evidence that a partial taking occurred. We again respectfully urge the court to deny Fitzpatrick's request for partial compensation. Thank you for your time, Your Honor.
Relator, you have 2 minutes for rebuttal.
May it please the court. The respondents keep trying to make a mountain out of a molehill with these safety violations. Yes, they were done because Fitzpatrick, as he testified in direct, couldn't afford to have an expensive plumber or electrician come in. Plus, these pose no critical threat, and if they did, they would have been graded as so, but they weren't. They were graded in a B-, which means that the restaurant is still safe to patronize and poses no critical threat. Well, let's talk about the big picture here. The fact that Hollis waited for over half a year just to get a response if he could get an exemption or not for his restaurant, which was dying. He kept trying everything that he could think of to get an exemption, and he wasn't doing it because he was thinking of himself. It's because he saw the Royal Minor movie set get one and really wanted to get one so that he could keep his family legacy alive for his kids, for their kids, for other people. He was ignored for over half a month. The Department of Health just kept pushing him off. You can't ignore this fact, as for the character of government action here would by itself tip the scale on a preponderance of evidence and show that a partial regulatory taking did occur. Therefore, the defense requests that the court grant our request for writ of mandamus so that eminent domain proceedings may follow. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. This time, as you are probably aware, I am required to read the following script. Does either team have serious reason to believe that a material violation of any rule has occurred during this trial? I'll remain on my virtual bench for 3 minutes, during which time any protest or objection may be brought to my attention by a team attorney. The team attorneys may communicate with any student team members involved in this particular trial, but may not communicate in any way with legal advisors, teachers, or anyone outside their performing team members in this trial. Timekeepers, you may start your watches.
The 2 minutes has concluded.
Actually, it's 3 minutes, but
Oh, wait, it's 3?
Um,
Oh, okay. I
yeah,
thought that
three.
was for judges' comments.
oh, yeah. Three is for post-trial objections as well.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Your Honor, this is not concerning any material violations, but the relator side would just like to clarify that we are not asking for any kind of compensation. We are asking for a writ of mandamus.
Correct.
Thank you.
Three minutes has passed.
Okay. Thanks very much. If you wish, you may come back on camera, and I will ask the scoring judges to come on camera and unmute at this time. Folks, this was a very fine trial, especially for the first one. I was very impressed by everyone who performed today. I'm going to ask first Ruth to give comments, and then Guinevere, and then I will sum things up with some comments.
I thought you all did an amazing job. You were both top caliber in your performance today. I was especially impressed with your use of exhibits. I think that you used the exhibits well, and you made points that you drew from the exhibits that weren't apparent from the trial materials. So that was really impressive. I think your use of case law was good. And I also think the cross-examinations were very compelling. I think the witnesses did a great job as well in making sure they conveyed their position, even while having to concede a few points. So overall, I was just very impressed with everyone here today. You did a great job.
Yeah, Guinevere.
No, I completely agree with Ruth. I was overly impressed with the caliber of advocacy and just how well each of you did. Especially, I was impressed with the use of exhibits. That's not an easy feat. And all of you were able to get them in with ease and use them and actually utilize them instead of just pointing to a piece of paper on a screen. As well, each attorney and each witness seemed to have really good knowledge of the actual case file. That's extremely important. You don't want to get up there and then be questioning things and be getting objections due to that. So each of you tended to have extremely great knowledge of the case file, and that was very impressive. And for the first day of the competition too, it's just incredible. And I can't wait to see where you guys go down the road.
I would agree with that. Just a few comments along the way, just some notes that I made. There was one exhibit that was shown that was from the original materials. It had been corrected. It was the one that showed a musical note instead of pinball machines in the corner. And I think there was a reference to the lower left-hand corner where there were toilets. So if you do advance and have the opportunity to present that again, make sure you're using, and this would apply to everyone, make sure that you're using any updates that OCLRA made to the exhibits. Another point that I did want to clarify, one of my rulings, and it involved a question whether the website failed because you hired a high school student, and I did allow that. I felt that because it was on cross, that it was reasonable extrapolation there that is permitted. It was on the borderline, but it was, in my opinion, reasonable. I wanted to echo something that Ruth mentioned. There were points that were made a couple of times in regard to the exhibits that I had missed when I reviewed the materials. One was in regard to the danger of flammable liquids. And I thought that was a particularly good and damaging thing on cross-examination. Probably the biggest thing I noticed, particularly Zhang. Zhang was qualified as an expert witness, but just personally, if I had been trying the case, I would have objected on the basis of bias. Now, that would also apply, maybe a little bit lesser extent to Ibarra, because I believe Ibarra had worked at Fitzpatrick's, so that could have been used. So I think each team had an opportunity there. I appreciated your comments sometimes, or the back and forth. Please answer yes or no. That didn't occur in our first trial, and I thought it was very effective. It was also very effective when the witness or the witness says complied and said yes, yes, yes. Because sometimes on cross, that's the best thing to do. There's a lot of information that is available to the attorneys on cross-examination here that is damaging. Let's see here. I've got a couple minutes left. Just wanted to say, watch your pace on closing, and watch the organization. That was one thing I noted about both closing arguments in regard to the organization. So today's case was about hard decisions on both sides. And you faced that challenge, and I congratulate you. So with that, trial's adjourned.
Well done, everyone.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
judges.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
Team
you. Thank you,
M-
Your Honor.
Thank
Team
you.
MC, Group Me.
And thanks to both of you
Oh, good
for
to see you. Yeah,
serving.
So
Yeah,
glad we could be here. It was great
Yeah.
meeting you.
great to meet
yeah,
everyone.
it was great. Okay, hope to
Right.
see y'all later. Okay,
Take
bye
care.
now.
Hello. No. Oh, good. Okay. Could do you have milk to use for your? I have just a little bit of milk to use to drink. Okay, good. Thank you. I don't know, about an hour, but just keep mine warm. Thank you. How are you feeling? You're going to be better?
Hi, everyone. I just closed the room. You were the last ones in the meeting, so you're all free to go. Thank you. Oh, Monica, you were muted if you were talking. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
all I was saying.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Have a good one.